Good morning. How are we doing today? My name is James Sweeney, aka SplitSuit. Welcome back to another video. Today I'm joined by Chris Warren. Chris, how you doing today?
Doing real well. How's it going, everyone?
Excellent. Let's get into another hand. This one was sent in on the Red Chip Poker forums a little while back, and I wanted to run through this spot together. And Hero's main question has to do with the turn, but I figured let's go through the entire spot and have fun, talk about each street. That work for you?
Works great.
Perfect. All right. So playing 100 NL, early position opens, MP folds, and Hero decides to call with pocket tens in the cutoff with 100 effective against under the gun. So first thoughts, like it, dislike it?
Yeah, I mean, just immediately, I would go to just kind of my GTO ranges, what happens in this scenario. And I'll actually go to our pro dashboard here and just pull up our GTO 6 mass ranges. So we land here, scroll down, we see we're facing a raise. We go see that under the gun raises, and we are opening, we're looking at our cutoff range. And, just the default play in a 6 max game is that we're not going to have a flat call range against an under the gun open from the cutoff. And this is just because I think it creates some very appealing scenarios for the button to squeeze and can make our life very difficult in that type of situation. And it's just a lot simpler to just kind of have like an only 3-bet range here. And in that scenario, tens would in fact be a 3-bet. It would be sort of to the kind of bottom of our pair range in terms of 3-bets. We wouldn't be 3-betting nines, but it would be a 3-bet, and that might feel weird to a lot of people because again, you're turning a bluff or tens into sort of a bluff. But for me, this is kind of the default play. What about you?
Yeah, the question is always, do I throw tens at the bottom of my 3-bet range or the top of my calling range? And I think a lot of players just kind of default towards calling. I think 3-betting is really, really attractive here. I think it simplifies things a massive amount. Never going to fault someone too much for throwing some of these into their calling range, but I do think 3-betting is going to perform a little bit better than most people give it credit for sure.
I think it's actually one of those situations where it's simpler to have an only 3-bet range here than it is to have a call range, because how do you balance out a call range? It gets really complicated because you need to now start 3-betting 10 some of the time, flat calling it some of the times. You need to have balance between those hands that you're doing 50% of the time. You need to make sure you have some strength in your flat call range, but you really can't be flat calling hands that are so strong like aces and kings. So it's just so much easier. Like if you have any confusion, in my opinion, just 3-bet or fold.
Yep, I'm not going to argue with that. So we end up not facing the squeeze, which makes life easier. End up going heads up to the flop, and early position decides to fire for about half pot on Jack 9-7 rainbow, and Hero decides to call. So first thoughts at this stage in the game.
I mean, super standard here. We decided to call. That's fine. It's not a disaster. We see the 50% cbet, again, going to be pretty standard, and we have a reasonable board for us. We have some ability to improve with the gut shot, and we have a reasonable pair. Like there's just no way we're folding. There's no way we're raising. Pretty much the only line.
Yep, pretty standard call here. Really not much to discuss, luckily. But the deuce of hearts in the turn, facing roughly a half potter, and Hero decides to fold. So let's back up one tick, facing this $7 cbet. I look at this spot, and the major question from Hero was, am I folding too much equity on this turn? And Hero did a pretty good job of trying to assign ranges as best they could on a street-by-street basis. And if I open up Flopzilla here, this is the range that Hero is assigning villain. And it's essentially, it has sets in here with pocket sevens, pocket nines, pocket jacks. It has things like queens plus. It has some things like ace jack, a couple things like ace queen suited, king queen suited, and a little ace 10 suited. But shy of that, a good chunk of this is pretty darn paired up. And I think it's always helpful to kind of start here and look at where tens fits into the entire thing. So if we go to Hero's range and we go over to the EQ graph, if we're looking for where pocket tens falls for Hero, we really got to go pretty close to the bottom. And in this situation, we have 10 of clubs, 10 of diamonds. So 10 of clubs, 10 of diamonds is ranked 32 out of the 41 combos that Hero has here. So it's definitely shading towards the bottom. And the issue here is because we are getting not the worst price in the world, we're getting about 3-1 in this situation. We don't have necessarily enough raw equity, but I think folding here is a mistake. So do you agree or disagree with that?
Yeah, I definitely immediately agree with that.
Okay. So what are you doing here? What's your thought process when you're facing this roughly half pot double barrel?
Yeah, so basically, I think the standard bet on this turn would be something closer to $10. So if I'm looking at the $7, I'm saying, oh, well, like villain's range is now wider than sort of the default, standard play that I would assume. And because of that, I'm getting a good price. Again, I still have some outs, 10s and 8s maybe. Maybe I'm ahead. Maybe I have like 2 pair outs as well, things like that. I just don't exactly know what's going on. Maybe he's just like throwing in another goofy bet with a goofy draw. And, all those things add up. I'm like, I don't know where I'm at. I have enough sort of value to improve, and I'm facing a smaller bet than usual. I want to call. And yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at.
Yeah. And I'm kind of in the same boat, and it's not like I'm looking to call here and call down on every single river against every single river bet, but it's one of these where like folding here, I understand a lot of players feel incentivized to fold things like second pair, 1.5 pair, like this one is. They start folding that on turns and rivers pretty religiously, and I understand it. It seems simpler, and you don't want to be a fish and start calling too wide, especially on turns and rivers where those bet sizes can get more expensive. But to be folding in this exact situation seems not so great. Again, we have decent pot odds in our favor. There could be some implied odds the times we're behind. I mean, I just don't see a ton of reason to just dump this right this moment. And like you said, under the gun could be firing here with like ace queen. They just don't know what to do with. Or maybe they picked up hearts and they don't really know how to size it. Or maybe they're sitting here with, well, ace 9 doesn't make a ton of sense from under the gun, but possibly. And maybe again, they don't know what to do with it. So again, there's like, we can't just say that our opponent only has things like top pair plus here and absolute nut draws. They could definitely have other hands as well. Yeah, I think folding here is just far, far, far too tight.
And I'll kind of pull up a solver double check. We did a look at, what it looks like versus the small sizing on the turn. And apparently I don't have it up just now. But yeah, basically like it pretty much validates that. Like a solver would be calling, would pretty much be calling on the turn there. So it's, oh, here we go. Yeah, and it's actually balanced between some calls and some folds. I'm trying to look at the combinations that they're choosing. It doesn't seem to be too much rhyme or reason to it. Basically, anything that blocks hearts is a call, it looks like. And then a few non-hearts combos. So that's kind of how it's balancing it out. And yeah, I mean, and then also we ran a solve against the larger sizing, and the larger sizing would be a fold. So yeah, it's just important to kind of keep that in mind that, it's the sizing matters a lot. And when your villain or your opponent says to you basically like, hey, I'm sort of wider ranged and doing, if we just look at that board texture too, like there's so many plausible hands that they could be doing this with, a goofy ace 8 and ace 10. Well, we're assuming they don't have ace 8 with that tight opening range, but yeah, I mean, there's just like king, queen, for sure. Just tons of things that just like, are just like, hey, well, he just called on this flop, like a strong hand would raise me. Maybe I just throw out another little block. 10-9 makes a lot of sense like the two, just like, hey, I think I'm ahead or, something like that. I want to throw out a bet. Like all of these things are very possible, very plausible. And I'm getting a good price and I have position, which will allow me to show down easily. And, in those scenarios, like I just call. And if I were facing the larger size, I would be leaning towards fold. So, it's one of those situations that's very dynamic based on the bet size we faced.
Yep. 100%. But agreed that against this half potter definitely call, continue, make some river decisions, but folding here is just far too tight given this exact size. So again, the biggest inflection points here, flop was totally standard, but the turn, too tight, and pre-flop, definitely at least consider looking at a 3-bet there rather than just always shunting 10s directly into your calling range. Really consider using those charts and looking for opportunities where you can widen that 3-bet range. And it may seem a little out of your comfort zone at first, but I promise you work with it a little bit, you do a little bit of post-flop practice in 3-bet pots, and I think you're going to find that pre-flop and post-flop get a lot easier rather than just always putting yourself in this kind of top of your calling range, and sometimes mistakes like this happen and they really start to cost you and add up. And it doesn't seem like a lot because there's a bunch of small to medium-sized pots, but at the end of the day, they do add up. So I would definitely heavily consider checking out those ranges. Any last-minute thoughts from you, Chris?
Yeah, I think it's really important to note that in a lot of times in this scenario, what you will see is you'll get shown a queen jack or a king jack or something like that, a cautious top pair, and you'll feel silly that you called. But in this type of scenario, the frequencies, because they're betting smaller, that means they're not really exploiting you, even if they say bet like 100% of their jack X hands. You know, as a tight undergun player, there's not that many. The frequencies, you're not really getting exploited, right? In fact, if they're using that smaller sizing and they're using it mostly for strong hands, that means you're actually getting lots of checks. And so your weaker hands, maybe say like 8s and 7-8 or whatever, that are going to have a harder time showing down, will show down more frequently and be able to take advantage of that. And they're not, say, bluffing like the ace 10 or the king queen or whatever enough that they need to be doing when they use that smaller sizing. So it's one of those spots that can kind of have like hidden value where it feels bad specifically with this hand, but the other parts of your range are getting a lot of value if your opponent is balancing the small bet sizing incorrectly.
Excellent. Perfect. Well, again, thank you, Heroes, so much for sending this hand in. Chris, thank you for joining me for analyzing it. And we will see you back shortly with a brand new video. Make sure to like and subscribe if you want more videos like this. And if you need anything at all, don't hesitate to leave a comment. Otherwise, we'll see you back shortly with a new video. And in the meantime, good luck out there and happy grinding.